A person with dementia has been walking for 40 minutes, pacing the exact same institutional corridor she has lived in for 3 years. She walks past her own door, turns around at the end of the hall, and walks past it again. The clinical vocabulary for this is wandering. It is a term that carries a heavy assumption that the walking is aimless, disorganized, and without a goal. This bar chart breaks down continuous video observation of more than 5,000 unassisted travel events by nursing home residents. The data shows that 86.8%. What has failed is not the motor function or the intent, but the internal map's ability to evaluate the success condition of that search. By labeling this behavior wandering, medicine misinterprets a perfectly executed biological algorithm as random confusion. That misinterpretation leads directly to flawed interventions. This flowchart outlines the scientific consensus of spatial memory failure in Alzheimer's disease. The central logic relies on this link. Somatostatin interneurons are among the earliest to die. The model assumes their death removes an inhibitory brake on the brain's spatial grid cells. Without that brake, the hexagonal coordinate system of the grid is expected to dissolve into neural noise, effectively erasing the patient's internal map. This chain creates a clear therapeutic target. The assumption is that restoring inhibitory tone to those grid cells pharmacologically will sharpen the map into focus and stop the wandering. But the model contains a paradox. If the map is simply blurred by noise, a highly salient external cue should rescue the patient. Yet individuals with dementia frequently fail to orient themselves even when staring directly at a familiar landmark, like their own bedroom door with their name printed on it. To test the standard model, researchers in 2017 executed a pharmacogenetic dissection, selectively silencing specific interneurons in freely moving mice. This schematic of the medial entorhinal cortex illustrates their first finding. The actual inhibitory partners responsible for sharpening the spatial grid are parvalbumin interneurons, not somatostatin. When they silenced the somatostatin cells, it had zero measurable impact on the hexagonal grid. The code remained intact. This creates a timeline problem for the prevailing consensus. Parvalbumin cells die very late in the progression of Alzheimer's. Spatial disorientation occurs early. The degradation of the grid metric cannot be the primary cause of early wandering. The standard model has the mechanism backward. The earliest spatial lesion in Alzheimer's is not a failure of the map's metric. The somatostatin cell must govern a completely different spatial operation. Mammals track their location using path integration, or dead reckoning. The brain continuously calculates displacement strictly by integrating its own self-motion and velocity. This diagram demonstrates the mathematical flaw in biological path integration. Every velocity estimate contains noise. As an animal moves, that noise integrates and the position estimate drifts. Because the error compounds with distance, any purely internal spatial system becomes inaccurate within minutes. The biological solution is a scheduled correction. When the drifting map encounters a known environmental boundary, like a physical wall, the accumulated error is instantly wiped clean, and the position estimate snaps back to reality. Spatial competence requires two entirely separate operations working in tandem, computing the metric internally and executing the reset externally. Neurological health is not possessing a perfectly accurate internal map. Health is possessing a map that can be continuously fixed by the outside world. To find the reset operation, we have to move out of the entorhinal cortex and look at a specific microcircuit in the hippocampus. This diagram isolates the CA1 pyramidal cell. It receives two competing streams of information. The CA3 pathway delivers internal memory and computation. The entorhinal pathway delivers the current sensory state of the external world. The Oriens lacunosum moleculare somatostatin interneuron sits perfectly between them. It acts as a physical toggle switch, actively suppressing the internal channel to let the external world in, and then alternating back. The reset is not a continuous signal that passively arrives. It is a scheduled alternation. The brain must briefly pause its internal math so that the external reality can register. This is the true nature of the early Alzheimer's lesion. When the somatostatin cell dies, this specific alternation collapses. The switch ceases. The external sensory signal still arrives at the cortex, but the circuit can no longer switch modes to bind visual information to the running map. The patient's map is not erased, and it is not blank. It is unresettable. They can look directly at a familiar door, but they can no longer use it to correct their drift. What does a path-integrating organism do when its internal vector expires and it hasn't found its goal? The desert ant navigates featureless salt pans where errors are fatal. Its nest lacks surrounding landmarks, meaning it relies entirely on dead reckoning to survive. If the ant runs out its home vector and the nest isn't there, it does not stop and it does not move at random. It immediately executes a hardwired fallback program, structured expanding loops, centered strictly on the point where the nest should have been. These two trajectories reveal the connection. The human corridor lapping we see in the clinical data is the exact same center-biased search algorithm. The human behavior is highly repetitive because the ancient survival program is mathematically center-biased. It continually returns to the last estimated location of the goal. And the search does not terminate because the program's only stopping rule is a success signal, a landmark binding to the map. Without the somatostatin reset switch, generating that success signal is impossible. Wandering is not a breakdown of locomotion. It is a flawless, ancient survival program, running perfectly, trapped in an infinite loop, because the physical environment can no longer turn it off. The current pharmaceutical proposal is to use an alpha-5 positive allosteric modulator to restore the missing inhibitory tone to the spatial system. This diagram reveals the flaw. The alpha-5 receptor isn't where the model needs it. It sits exclusively at the synapse between a VIP terminal and a somatostatin interneuron. The VIP terminal is a disinhibitory cell. Its biological function is to silence the somatostatin interneuron. Administering a positive modulator at this precise address amplifies the VIP signal. It does not restore the broken brake. It presses down harder on the brake's release. You cannot fix a broken biological switch by flooding the entire system with general inhibition. The pharmacology of tone cannot supply the anatomy of address. The clinical literature often fuses two behaviors requiring strict separation: indoor wandering and outdoor missing incidents. A corridor has walls. The outside world does not. Indoors, the unresettable map produces wandering because the architecture of the building physically folds the center-biased search back in on itself, creating the loops. But when this exact same lesion occurs outdoors during a routine errand, the patient experiences a single-trip navigational failure. Without walls to contain the search, the uncorrected drift pulls them away from safety, and they become lost. Indoor looping and outdoor missing incidents are not different diseases. They are the exact same circuit lesion expressing itself through two different environmental geometries. This search does not happen calmly. The locus coeruleus interprets the unresolved navigational error as a severe threat, flooding the system with noradrenaline. A spatial calculation error becomes an affective crisis. Medicine frequently responds by chemically sedating the patient. That stops the walking, but it leaves them terrified inside a broken, uncorrected map. Sedation is not correction. If the brain's internal binding operation is degraded, the intervention must shift the burden to external environmental architecture. The environment must provide a single, highly personal, completely unambiguous physical anchor, positioned exactly at the point where the patient's search would normally continue past it. If the biological algorithm can no longer register its own arrival, we must design spaces that forcefully deliver that success condition. We must give the homeward vector an unmistakable place to terminate.